Let me pose a situation for you.
You have probably heard this somewhere before. Suppose you are the driver of a trolley. The trolley rounds a bend and you see ahead 5 workmen who have been repairing the truck. The trolley goes out of control and you must stop the trolley if you are to avoid running the 5 men. The brakes are not working, but you suddenly see there's a truck leading off to the right. You can divert the trolley and thus save the 5 men. But in that truck there is one workman who would not be able to get out of the truck in time, so you will kill him if you turn the trolley onto him. The big question here is it morally permissible for you to turn the trolley?
Should you divert the train?
Which one is the most ethical option? What's the right thing to do?
Hello everyone, this is Wandering Tati. For this video, we will go through different variants of this problem. We will discuss possible solutions and the differences between them. I will mark the problems clearly as I did with the original case,
so that you will be able to stop the video and think about it for a while on your own if you would like to do so.
As for my personal answer to the problem, yes, I think it is morally permissible for you as the conductor to divert the trolley to the right track. If we don't, we will kill 5 people. And if we do, we kill 1.
Either way, we are killing someone. So it's better to minimize that number.
Most people would answer yes in that scenario. There are in fact many surveys in which about 90% of respondents have chosen to kill the 1 to save the 5. But some other scenarios that arise from that problem might not be so straightforward. The trolley problem was first posed by Philippa Foot in 1967 in her paper The Problem of Abortion and the Doctrine of the Double Effect. As you can guess from the title of the paper, this type of moral dilemmas were presented as to make parallel to some difficult decisions people might need to make. Briefly, this double effect that Foot mentions on her paper
is, in a sense, an algorithm for solving moral dilemmas, in which an act will have 2 effects, one good and one bad. According to the doctrine, basically 4 conditions would have to be met for an act to be considered morally permissible. First, the action must be either morally good or indifferent. Second, the bad effect must not be the means by which one achieves the good effect. Third, the intention must be the achieving of only the good effect, with the bad effect being only an unintended side effect. And fourth, the good effect must be at least equivalent in importance to the bad effect.
Before moving on to seeing some other interesting variants of the trolley problem, let us define what we mean when we say morally permissible. When we say that something is morally permissible, we mean that it is morally okay to do, which is not the same as something being morally obligatory. We would say something is morally obligatory if we ought to do so. An example of this is if you were to enter a bathroom and you would realize that there is a baby drowning in the bathtub. It is your moral duty, that is, it is morally obligatory for you to save the baby. But then something like donating to charity is not a moral obligation. It is morally permissible, and we might in fact say that it is morally virtuous to do so, but it is not mandatory.
Although, as we will see, nothing is set in stone when it comes to moral philosophy.
All of these definitions and proposed solutions are debatable, of course. Okay, let me now show you the problem in a slightly different version, as proposed by Judith Thomson in her paper The Trolley Problem. She calls this version of the problem the bystander at the switch.
You are standing next to the tracks of a train. There is a lever next to you that, should you pull it, would divert the incoming train headed towards the bifurcation to the other track. There are 5 people tied to the track in which the train would go should it stay on its current direction. On the other track, there's 1 person tied up to it. The train cannot stop in time. It will go on and step on whoever is in the track that it goes through.
Regarding this second scenario, it is likely that we think that 5 people dying is a worse outcome than 1 person dying. But remember that in order for that to happen in this case, you would have to stop being a spectator and take action. You would have to make the active decision to divert the trolley and make it so that it kills that 1 person that would have been safe otherwise.
This time you are not the conductor, so it is not you who would kill the 5 people. but it is you who would kill the one.
The question is, can we go through with that? In case you wonder what real people subject to a similar situation might actually do, you can watch the episode of the series Minefield in the channel Vsauce, in which a trolley problem experiment was conducted.
And by the way, there was even a real-life case which is pretty similar to this.
In the United States, the cars of a Union Pacific train broke loose during a switching operation and rolled 43 kilometers before railroad officials switched the cars to the side tracks to stop them from reaching heavily populated downtown LA, therefore reaching a smaller population where 13 people were injured.
Luckily, nobody had to die in this real-life scenario.
As for me, I would divert the train. As awful as it is to be responsible for the death of one person, I think I need to save the 5. If we have a more consequentialist view of ethics, we might think that it is the right thing to do to save the life of 5 people, even if it is at the cost of 1 life. Utilitarians might even argue that it is actually your moral obligation to move the switch, as it would maximize utility. 1 death is better than 5 deaths. Some people might think that killing is just morally wrong and is not permissible no matter the circumstances, even if your intentions for doing so are good, as it is in this case. And some might consider that making the choice and intervening in something that is already morally wrong would make you partially responsible for the moral wrong. Meanwhile, by not doing anything, you are not morally responsible. Others may think, as do I, that simply being there to witness this situation and being able to influence its outcome constitutes an obligation to participate. We might convince ourselves that not doing anything leaves us off the hook.
But not doing anything is a choice.
Imagine this slightly different scenario.
Most things are the same. You are standing next to a lever that would change the course of the train. There's 5 people tied up to the trails on the track the train is currently going through. But this time, there isn't anyone on the other track. By pulling the lever, you would divert the train and nobody would die.
Would you argue then that even though it was right at your hand and representing no risk to you whatsoever to stop that tragedy from happening, that you are not responsible at all if you do nothing?
It's not that easy to justify it then, right?
It seems to me that most people would agree that we should pull the lever if we were in this last situation.
Most people who are not psychopaths, at least.
Well, the bystander problem is just that, but with one more degree of difficulty. We can't just get out of it by saying that we are not responsible for anything that happens because we did not create the situation in the first place. Many times in life we will encounter situations that were not created by us, but our decisions toward those are still determinant to their outcome. How about this other situation? We will now consider the weight of the person who is tied to the track on the right.
No, not whether or not they are fat, although that will come later actually.
I mean their weight in our personal scale of value.
Suppose that the one person tied up alone in the track is your little cousin Timmy. Would you pull the lever then and save 5 strangers to the cost of little Timmy's life?
If I'm to answer honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I recognize it's not the morally virtuous thing to do, but still, I want to answer this honestly.
Not that I would want the 5 strangers to die, but I mean, little Timmy.
There's a study showing that whenever people are presented with this problem in which the person in the right track is actually a member of their family or their significant other, then they are much less likely to be willing to sacrifice the 1 life in order to save the 5. Now, you may think that all of these are such fringe, artificial examples, that you are never in your life going to encounter a situation like this. But I don't think so.
Yes, they are simplified and exaggerated examples.
But they are not completely detached from reality. What about triage, for instance? Doctors face this type of decisions all the time, basically deciding whose life is to be saved or not. They are, in a sense, putting a weight into people's lives and choosing who to treat first. Also, how about a list of people waiting for an organ transplant? We are attributing some sort of weight or value to them as well. And come to think of it, suppose you can donate a kidney. Yes, this is something that might create some discomfort for you, but you can still manage a perfectly fine and healthy life with only 1 kidney. Little Timmy is in need of a kidney transplant. He is not the first one on the list to receive one though, and you are actually compatible to the first people on the list as well.
But you will give your kidney to little Timmy, right?
Even though the first 5 people on the list might not make it because they will not receive a kidney on time. Oh, and how about the technology of self-driving cars? Their navigational AIs are trained with trolley-like problems in order to ensure that the machine will decide in a way as to harm the fewest number of people in the event of an unstoppable collision. There is a platform called Moral Machine, created by MIT Media Lab to allow the public to express their opinions on what decisions autonomous vehicles should make in scenarios that use the trolley problem paradigm. You can check it out and take the test for yourself. Also, it might seem more distant, but when we give to a charity and decide to donate towards curing cancer, say, we are at the same time not donating the money towards curing malaria, for example. We are making a choice as to who to save, so to speak. It's always a heavy burden to choose, but we have no choice. Sorry. In this type of problems, there isn't a right answer that will make us all feel good about our decisions.
Kind of like in real life. Although we all know that Nicholas has found the ultimate solution at the tender age of 2.
Which way should the train go?
This way.
How about this version that Thomson proposes? We will refer to it as Fat Man.
Now you are watching everything from a bridge above the tracks. You can see that the train is out of control, and if it keeps going as is, 5 people who are tied to the track just past the bridge will be killed. The only way to stop the train is to drop a heavy weight into its path. The only available heavy enough weight is a very fat man who's standing next to you on the bridge. If you were to push the fat man to the path of the train, this would kill him but save the 5 people on the track. If you do nothing, the fat man lives but the 5 people on the track die. What should you do?
This one sounds a lot worse because you will be more actively killing the one person in order to save the 5. But the results are the same though. 1 person dying because of a decision you made and something you did, and 5 people being saved. At first glance, at least, it seems that if you were to pull the lever in bystander, then you should also throw the fat man in this case.
But maybe not.
Statistically, most people who would pull the lever would not throw the fat man in the tracks. And I get it, because I gravitate towards that answer myself. My moral intuition tells me that there is something that's different about these two situations.
We just need to pinpoint what it is.
On the one hand, there seems to be a violence involved in this case that is not present on the first one. But that might only be a psychological factor. We might feel that what we are doing is worse because we are actively pushing someone from a bridge.
Which, rightly so, sounds like an awful thing to do.
It seems that killing someone by pulling a lever or pressing a button feels less like an act of violence, right?
You are still killing that person though.
So there has to be something else differentiating the two situations. Oh, and what about this variant I found on the website Philosophy Experiments?
What if you knew for a fact that the fat man standing next to you is the diabolical mastermind of this whole scenario, and he stands there to watch this whole thing play out and rejoice? What would you do then?
Would you throw the bastard right into the tracks?
We probably would, right?
So I guess the degree of innocence of the people involved has something to do with the decisions we make. But in all scenarios previous to this one, everyone seems to be equally innocent, right? In order to analyze further the differences between the situations, let us check some more scenarios presented by Thomson and others. This one is referred to as transplant.
This time you are a surgeon, a truly great surgeon in fact. So much so that the organs you transplant always take. At the moment you have 5 patients who need organs. 2 need 1 lung each, 2 need a kidney each, and the 5th one needs a heart. If they do not get those organs today, they will all die. If you find organs for them today, you can transplant the organs and they will all live. The time is almost up when a report is brought to you that a young man who has just come into your clinic for his yearly checkup has exactly the right blood type and is in excellent health. Now you have a possible donor. All you need to do is cut him up and distribute his parts among the 5 who need them. You ask, but he says, sorry, I deeply sympathize, but no. Would it be morally permissible for you to operate anyway?
I think most of us would answer with a resounding no in this scenario. But we still need to pinpoint what is it about this case that makes it morally different from the bystander case, say. In both of those cases, one person would die if the agent acts, and 5 that would have otherwise died would be saved. A proposed solution to pinpoint this difference is that somehow letting someone die is not as bad as killing someone. This is stated by Foot in her paper. So, for instance, in the original trolley problem, if you were not to change tracks, you would be killing 5 people. And we could argue that killing 5 is worse than killing 1, so we ought to divert the trolley. It is not so clear in the bystander scenario, because in that case you would be letting 5 people die if you did nothing, and you would kill 1 if you did. Also, there could be cases in which it's not so clear that killing someone is worse than letting someone die.
For instance, in her paper Killing, Letting Die and the Trolley Problem, Thompson proposes these 2 cases where we might say that letting die is just as bad as killing. First, Alfred hates his wife and he wants her dead. He puts cleaning fluid in her coffee, thereby killing her. And second, Bert hates his wife and wants her dead. She puts cleaning fluid in her own coffee, being muddled thinking it's cream. Bert happens to have the antidote to cleaning fluid, but he does not give it to her, he lets her die. You know, there is something called a divorce, people.
So the distinctions between the cases might have to do with something else. Thompson mentions that the fact that we might find transplant way worse is because we are considering a person as nothing more than a means to an end. She recalls the following quote by Kant.
Act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only.
Perhaps this is the distinction we have between bystander and transplant. In the latter, the young man who came for a checkup would have definitely been used as nothing more than a means. An option that Thompson presents is that if the agent chooses to engage in the course of action, then they use the one to save the 5 only if, had the one gone out of existence just before the agent started, the agent would have been unable to save the 5. That is true in transplant. The agent does need the young man in order to save the 5. Meanwhile, the agent in bystander does not need the person in the right-hand track to save the 5. And in that sense, Fat Man is more similar to transplant than to bystander, as the fat man in question is a necessary means in order to save the 5. But then Thompson poses yet another slightly different problem.
Of course.
This one is called loop.
Let us now imagine that the 5 on the straight track are thin, but thick enough so that although all 5 will be killed if the trolley goes straight, the bodies of the 5 will stop it, and it will therefore not reach the 1. On the other hand, the one on the right-hand track is fat, so fat that his body will by itself stop the trolley, and the trolley will therefore not reach the 5. May the agent turn the trolley?
She does mention that she is surprised by the fact that some people experience more discomfort with loop than with bystander. But as she states, can the mere presence or absence of an extra bit of track make any moral difference? Probably not, and so we might go ahead and say that it is morally permissible to divert the train. But notice that in this case, the one person is necessary in order to save the 5. If the fat man in question would just disappear into nothingness, then we would not be able to save the 5 people on the straight track. So this problem is actually more similar to transplant than to bystander.
In that sense, at least.
I would also tend to think that we should pull the lever in this case. So we must think about what the justification is for this. How is this different than transplant? Another distinctive factor might have to do with the intentions behind each of the actions.
Some philosophers consider that there is a difference between having the intention of doing harm or not.
So, for instance, we may say that in the trolley problem or bystander, one does not intend harm towards anyone. Harming that one person is only a side effect of switching the trolley away from the 5. However, in transplant, Fatman, or loop, harming the 1 is an integral part of saving the 5. This distinction is an application of the doctrine of the double effect that Foot mentions in her paper, which, as we saw at the beginning of the video, says one may take an action that has bad side effects, but deliberately intending harm, even for a good cause, is wrong. Foot, in regards to the trolley problem she first presented, would argue that we must accept that our negative duties, such as the obligation to refrain from such things as killing or robbing, are more stringent than our positive duties, such as the duty to save lives or to look after children or aged parents. If the surgeon at transplant does nothing, she violates a positive duty to save 5 lives. If she cuts up the healthy person, she violates a negative duty to refrain from killing 1. And we might argue that the negative duty to refrain from killing 1 is not only more stringent than the positive duty to save 1, but it is even more stringent than the positive duty to save 5. The conflict for bystander then is between the negative duty to refrain from killing 1 and the positive duty to save 5. In the case of the trolley driver from the original scenario, there is simply a conflict between a negative duty to refrain from killing 5 and a negative duty to refrain from killing 1. Perhaps what's in question in these cases is deflecting an already existing threat from a larger group onto a smaller group versus creating a different threat to the smaller group. Another thing to consider might be whether or not the 1 has no more claim against the trolley than any of the 5. If they are all workmen that are working on the tracks, then they are aware of the risks of working right on the tracks of a train, and one of them simply was sent by chance to work alone in the right track, while the other 5 work on the left track. It seems that none of them has more claim against the trolley than any other, and so the agent may proceed and make the switch. But what about this other case that Thompson brings about?
The 5 on the straight track are regular workmen. The right-hand track is a dead end, unused in 10 years. The mayor, representing the city, has set out a picnic table on it and invited the convalescents of the nearby city hospital to have their meals there, guaranteeing them that no trolleys will ever, for any reason, be turned onto that track. The 1 on the right-hand track is a convalescent having his lunch there. It would have never occurred to him to do so if the mayor had not issued this invitation and guarantee. The mayor was out for a walk. He now stands at the switch.
In this case, it seems that the convalescent in the right-hand track has definitely more claim against the trolley than the 5 workmen. So perhaps if we were the mayor, we should not pull the lever in this case. Let's just revise one more case presented by Thompson regarding these distinctions.
The 5 on the track ahead are regular track workmen, repairing the track. The 1 on the right-hand track is a schoolboy, collecting pebbles on the track. He knows he doesn't belong there. He climbed the fence to get onto the track, ignoring all warning signs, thinking to himself, who could find it in their heart to turn a trolley onto a schoolboy? Well,
in this last situation, the 5 workers would definitely have more claim against the trolley than the schoolboy on the right-hand track.
So perhaps we may deviate the trolley towards him.
The reasons for our moral intuitions are not always obvious. In my opinion, it's valuable to consider this type of moral dilemmas seriously, to really ponder on them and have our answers properly justified, as hard as it may be, and even if we don't arrive at a definite solution. So that next time we encounter a problem of moral philosophy in our lives,
and we will,
we may make the decision that goes in accordance to our principles and not a rash, spur-of-the-moment decision. So that is all for my video on the trolley problem and its variations. I really hope you found this video valuable and that it made you consider some important aspects of morality. If it did, please hit the like button to let me know.
And please let me know in the comments what your responses to each of the scenarios would be. I would really like to see all different perspectives on this.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Until next time!